So welcome to Sunday Morning Sitting Group. Once again, I am Trudy, the founding teacher at InsightLA. Very happy to be with you all this morning. And let's see, Caroline, I don't see you, but I know that Caroline is moderating for us this morning. So thank you for that.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry, my camera's not working today, but
That's
happy to be here.
okay. We know those of us who've been coming, we know your lovely face. So just glad you're here. And to know that that's who's behind the InsightLA logo. And we have spent the last few weeks really, ever since the attacks in Atlanta, just exploring themes of anger and how to work with it and why do beings hate, and really looking at some of the ways that we can work with these mind states. Whoops, excuse me, an AirPod just fell out. Some of the ways that we can work with these mind states. And today I thought, maybe because it's such a sunny morning in Northern California, where I am right now up at Jack's, I thought I would like to talk about not forgetting about joy and how we can develop joy and the difference between metta and mudita. Mudita is the Pali and Sanskrit word for joy. It's a particular kind of joy that we can participate in, even if there's nothing particularly joyful in our own circumstances at this point. And so it's a really important one of the cultivations that we can do to support our life and happiness in this life. So we will, for those of you who are new, we begin with a half an hour of meditation, and then we'll have some teachings and a chance for conversation, any questions or reflections or concerns that you have. You will be able to have some time to share together. So wherever you are, find your position that you can sit comfortably, or whatever posture you need to be in for a while. And I do some light guided meditation with a lot of room for silence. And we'll begin by just settling with the breath, as we always do. And then I will offer some specific phrases that can evoke mudita, or at least the intention, to plant the seeds of the intention of recognizing and participating in joy, even in the midst of suffering or grief or anger or sorrow. We can still have moments of joy, and they're maybe even more important, because that's what keeps us going and gives us the courage and energy and confidence to work with the difficult feelings. So beginning by taking a deep breath in and releasing. Breathing in all the aliveness of this moment, and breathing out any tension in the body. One more time. And completely releasing any tension as you breathe out. And then resting the attention lightly with the movement of the breath. And keeping the breath, each breath, company with attentiveness, mindful awareness. And if the ebb and flow of breath is not comforting for you, if focusing on the breath, maybe because of difficulty breathing or illness or whatever reason, isn't soothing, then try noticing the sounds of life around you. Sensing the sensations in the body. Can sometimes feel a sort of light vibration or sense the pulse, the heartbeat. These only happen in the present moment. So bringing attention to the breath, to sound, sensation, is a way of helping the mind, helping our whole being to stay present, to stay here as we meditate together. And of course, the mind wanders around into the past and the future. And imagine that the mind is like a joyful child exploring and jumping around and really just having a time looking at everything. And as we come back to keep the focus on this moment, this breath, this sound, this sensation, to just allow the mind to do what it does and to appreciate the liveliness as it jumps and bounces around while we sit still or be still, whatever posture we're in. And when you feel like it, you can call to mind someone who's happy, maybe a child that you saw playing, maybe a couple that you saw holding hands, maybe a friend just had something good happen in their life. And you can offer the phrase, may your happiness grow and grow. Or if it's somebody who's just had some kind of windfall, may your good fortune continue. And just like a metta phrase, may your happiness grow. May your good fortune continue. You can choose anyone and hold them clearly in your mind, either visualizing them or sensing them near you at a time when you knew they were happy. You can reflect on all the good things in their life. May your happiness grow and continue. And as you do this, you may notice thoughts like, hey, how come they're so happy or they're so lucky? How come I'm not? Or no fair? Or there doesn't seem to be enough to go around. If you notice these thoughts, just start gently bringing your mind back to seeing joy in the world. And in a small way, participating in this joy, joining. May your joy grow and grow. May your happiness continue and increase. You can include more than one person. You could include your dog running across a field. And traditionally, this practice is not offered to oneself the way we do with the loving kindness and compassion practices, but I don't see anything wrong with offering to oneself as well. Just focusing on happiness or joy that may have come your way. If not recently, then a while ago. And offering the aspiration or wish. May my happiness continue. May happiness come back into my life. Noticing whatever you may be grateful for. May my good fortune continue and increase. And so I just want to begin with a little story. I think I was muted when I rang the bell, actually. I'm sorry about that. Here, let's try that again. Sorry about that. I had muted because there was noise outside. Okay, just to start over. So I'd like to just begin with one of my favorite stories, and it's a very simple illustration of how we can connect with joy in our lives. And it's actually a story from my life. I was picking up my grandson at school 12 years ago when he was 5 years old. And we were in the car waiting for his sister to come, his older sister to come out of her class. We had some time and the windows were open. It was a sunny day. We were parked so he could be free from the car seat restraints and just, he was just lolling back in his, I guess it was a booster seat at that point, with his feet kind of braced against the seat in front of him. And he had his chocolate milk, which was his favorite drink. I think it actually still is, but he's probably moved on to other things at age 17 as well. But he also had a cookie. And so he had chocolate milk, he had a cookie, and he was telling me about, he had been waiting and waiting and waiting for the school library for this Star Wars cookbook to be available. And the librarian had just given him the Star Wars cookbook, which of course is all, gooey, sweet desserts, the entire cookbook. And he was just so thrilled. And so he was leaning back and kind of showing me the cookbook and having sips of chocolate milk and bites of cookie. And he just, at one point, he just stopped and said, "Nini," was what they call me, "Nini, this is paradise." And that was 5-year-old paradise, but it was very simple, really. And we can practice mudita meditation by visualizing simple things, that it's mudita. Actually, let me just do the formal part of the talk, which is mudita is the third of the Brahma Viharas, the immeasurables, the beautiful places where the heart can dwell. Brahma means divine and Vihar means dwelling place. And it's sometimes translated as sympathetic joy or empathetic joy because it's really about the capacity to participate in the joy of others. And it's a really important, I think it's an undervalued Brahma Vihara, actually, because when you can participate in the joy of others, your joy is boundless. There's just endless opportunities for it. You just have to be open to what's happening around you. It could be children playing. It could be, a dog being taken for a walk. I can see through the window when I sit in the morning, there's a woman who comes, there's this sort of grassy area, and she comes and plays with her golden retriever, throwing the ball, and the dog is so happy chasing the ball and bringing it back. And they both look like they're having a really fun time. That's a chance for mudita. Or, when I go for a walk, there's a man who sits and suns himself on a bench near the path where I walk. It can be anything that we notice, but it does take a conscious effort, and it has to be a conscious choice, because otherwise the mind will fall into its default habit, which is, we're wired for survival, and the brain has this negativity bias of noticing whatever might be threatening or might make us less safe in the world. So we might complain about the dog might poop in that grass and she might not pick it up. We might worry about that. Or we might look at a happy couple walking hand in hand and thinking, that's not going to last. Or, there are all kinds of reactions we can have to what we're seeing. So it's a kind of training or practice to see the good, the joy in the world that's here for us. And I read an article this morning. I tried to paste it into the chat, but you can't really paste. I couldn't figure out how to do it. But the article is, maybe you can find it, Caroline. on the New York Times website. It's called something like "Don't Take Your Head Out of the Clouds," and it's an article about daydreaming. And I loved it because it was talking about how a lot of times when the mind is just left to wander all by itself, it wanders into fears, it wanders into past hurts, it wanders into areas that, are the opposite of joyful. And it was talking about a conscious effort to do positive daydreaming. And I thought, this is Brahma-vihara practice, actually. This is what we're doing when we do, oh, thank you, Caroline. She just put it in the chat. This is what we do. We're doing a kind of intentionally positive daydreaming to train the mind. And in order to do it, we have to actually face things that get in the way of joy, and what are the obstacles to joy in our life, and to look at what supports joy in your life. What does support joy in your life? What sort of helps you walk on the path to joy? This is a good reflection for all of us, I think. When you think of what is mudita exactly, like what kind of joy are we talking about? You can think of the kind of happiness that, say, a parent might have, like Katie might have when Grace is enjoying herself. A parent might have when their child, their dear only child, is having a fun moment. Or there's the word that is said at the end of talks when you've heard a Dharma talk in the Theravada tradition of early Buddhism, and you may have heard somebody say this, sadhu. You say sadhu, 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 which means kind of like, yay, great, yes, cheering you on. It's an expression of joy, actually, something that we can extend by paying attention to it. And that's the thing. We can, when we bring our attention to joy in ourselves, we are strengthening that quality. It sounds easy, but in order to do it, we have to also be willing to see what's in the way and work with that, as we've been talking about for the last weeks. And as also Elisa shared on how she works with her anger at racism and so forth. And I think that the difference between metta and mudita, they're similar in the sense that there's that wish for beings to be happy, but with metta, we're wishing for beings to be happy who may not be, who may be having a hard time. If they're really suffering, of course, it turns into karuna, compassion. With mudita, the person is already happy. With this joy practice, the person or the dog or whoever it is we're focusing on is already happy. And so it's not just about cultivating happiness. It's about valuing, appreciating the good qualities that people have that bring them joy and bring them happiness. And so, yeah, we're recognizing also the qualities, the behaviors, the ethics that bring joy into and peace into people's lives. And there's another beautiful thing about joy, and I want to share a little video clip of a little boy, a toddler actually. Caroline, can you show that clip that Alex sent to you from me? Yeah, I know, you have to cue it up for a minute. And I think little kids have a natural, okay, thank you. Does it have volume? It has to.
I have to share my volume too.
Oh yeah, okay, the volume is really important with this. We have to be able to hear it.
All right.
Yeah, exactly like this. That's probably why. The thing is, like, I mean, also said in their ways that, like, even if I was like, can you know, maybe like,
eating bubbles.
Thank you, Caroline. So how do you feel after you watched that? I see a lot of smiles, you know, and that's the thing. Joy is contagious. It's contagious. It's for everybody. And, you know, his joy at, I mean, it was pretty funny, I thought. I mean, his joy at the dog, you know, catching the bubbles, and his laughter, right? It's contagious. We can feel it. And even if you don't even particularly like kids, just the sound of somebody's laughter, hopefully is a little bit uplifting. So when we see, this is an antidote. Traditionally, this practice of mudita is an antidote to envy and jealousy. And just as I was saying in the meditation, you know, we can go either way when we see somebody who has something wonderful in their life. You know, you're single and alone and you see somebody who's happy and has a partner and it's been COVID all year and nobody, look at, you know, nobody's touched anybody in the world, the whole world for a year, unless you have lived with somebody you can touch. And so there might be that tendency to just burrow into self-pity or sadness or just longing. And that's normal. It's fine, except that it's not something we really want to cultivate. What we would like to be able to do is share in the joy or the happiness or the good fortune, because then it becomes part of ours, part of our life and consciousness. And that's uplifting. And it, as I said earlier, it gives us the courage to face the things that are really hard in this life and in our culture right now, especially. I like to do a practice when we're in person. I was trying to figure out how we could do it on Zoom without going into breakout dyads, which takes too much time, where you each say to, you pick a person, you know, usually it's the person sitting next to you and you just do it. And you look at them and you say these phrases that come from 18th century Sri Lankan text on mudita, joy meditation. And the phrases are, how wonderful you are in your being. I'm glad that you are here. I take joy in your good fortune. May your happiness continue. So I'm going to say this to you. I want you to pretend that I'm only looking at you. It's just the two of us. And I'm saying these words to you, and you know that these words are completely scripted. They're not spontaneously coming from my heart, right? I'm reading them from a text, but I'm looking at you and I'm saying them to you. And just see how it feels. How wonderful you are in your being. I'm glad that you're here. So glad that you're here. I take joy in your good fortune, whatever good fortune you have. May your happiness and good fortune continue. So how did it feel to hear that, even knowing that, you know, it was a prepared text? You can put in the chat. I mean, just if it felt good or if it felt fake or if it gave you any feeling at all. Just usually when people say it to each other, and I've never done it on Zoom, so I don't know, but usually if people say it to each other, there's some sense of, yes, I will write it down for you, Claire. I will definitely type it for you. Just take a moment, everybody. I'm going to type this for Claire. That's the first phrase. I'm glad you are here. I take joy in your good fortune. Oops. Fortune, whatever may be. May your happiness continue and grow. Okay, Claire, now you have it. And I use this just because it just shows how little it takes actually for us to feel somewhat appreciated and seen. And these are phrases we might say to each other when we haven't seen each other for a long time or something like that. But the Buddha was known as the happy one. You know, this was somebody who seemed always to be at peace and have joy. And the Buddha encouraged us to have joy, even saying, go among the troubled, you know, be joyful even among those who are not joyful. Don't feel guilty about being joyful. Well, I'm paraphrasing, but, you know, it doesn't help others who are suffering for you not to be happy or joyful. And we might think, well, why do we have to cultivate this? Isn't it something that arises spontaneously? Well, in certain moments, yes, it does. But unfortunately, for most of us, most of the time, it isn't true. So cultivating, and that word, I love that word. It means to encourage, to foster the growth of, and it's a great word for spring right now, cultivating. It means, of course, preparing, you know, for raising crops and things like that. But to prepare a field to grow things, if we use that analogy, you have to first take out like the big rocks and the weeds and the things that would choke off the growth. And so we do that in our practice. We work with the unhealthy states of mind. We work with the difficult emotions. And we do that also to sort of clear the way and make room. We're creating the conditions where these more beautiful daydreams, these more positive mind states, you know, where they can arise. And then we can also come back to them and kind of try to preserve and sustain them as once they have arisen. So it's like we fertilize the little plants that have sprouted from our cultivation. You know, we fertilize them with our practice, with our intention to incline the heart in this direction. And it's never based on denial. We're not denying that sometimes there's envy or jealousy in each one of us at certain moments. But we're making a conscious choice about where we place the attention and where to focus. And that's, of course, called practice. So, you know, we're surrounded by so much hateful stuff on social media, especially online, especially as we've been talking about for a while now. And we have this, you know, wired for survival, biological preservation function of the mind that is always on the lookout as someone coming to eat me or kill me or hurt me or steal something from me or my child or my mate, or, you know, and so we have a natural inclination toward fear and aversion. And even if we didn't have the media bombarding us with the negative and the unpleasant, there would still be this ingrained tendency of the mind toward the negative. And that's the effort that it takes. And I think one of the things I appreciated about the New York Times article about daydreaming is that it really acknowledges the effort that it takes to focus on more positive kinds of daydreams rather than, you know, the fearful ones, the worrisome, anxious ones. Let's see what else I want to share with you today. So it would be good, I think, for all of us to reflect on what it is that that supports joy. What gets in the way? It might be something to talk about in the small groups that meet after 10-minute break at the end of the sitting group. to look at that. What is it in your life that supports your walking on the path to joy versus, what are the stumbling blocks in doing that? And how is joy a Dharma door for us in our life? I think it creates ease, and it helps us, it helps balance the over conscientious, sometimes over serious way we have of approaching the practice. And the Buddha addressed that too with the example of the lute, that if the strings are too loose, they won't play. And if they're too tight, they'll snap. And it has to be wise effort, just the right amount. So I think mudita can balance that zeal for discipline that sometimes can make some of us overzealous and over scrupulous in the practice, which is a quite joyless approach, actually. Yeah, pretty joyless approach. So I love this quality for refreshing the heart and helping us keep our balance in what are still hard. Pandemic is still happening, even though some of us may have been vaccinated. To be able to rejoice in the happiness of others is something that we can all learn how to do more and more of the time. So this is what I want to share with you this morning. And I now want to, just invite you to, if you have an observation, a question. We used to say Q&A. We don't say questions and answers anymore because I know I don't have the answers any more than you do. We're all exploring together in this life. So Mitchell has raised his hand. If you want to say something, you can say it in the chat or you can raise your hand and Caroline will call on you and then you can mute yourself.
Yeah, just as a reminder, the raise hand function is in the reactions in the bottom part of your screen. And Mitchell, feel free to go ahead and unmute.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Oh, let me put you on speaker, Mitchell, so I can really see you too. Hold on. Okay, hi.
Hi there. So I recently just ended a somewhat long-term kind of toxic relationship. And it's great because a lot of, what you're talking about today really relates to that. But I was wondering maybe if I could get some insight on like navigating the embodiment of knowledge when it's in conflict with like the present state of like feeling and emotion and attachments.
Okay, can you tell me a little more, like maybe a specific example, Mitchell? I mean, generally I understand what you're saying, but like what's making you ask specifically?
I guess knowing that it was the right decision and following through on the decision, but then still struggling with the attachment and the connection and separation. Emotions that are tied with that.
Sure. That's a really great question. And it's a universal question for anybody who has acted on their own behalf in the way that you just did. And so, first of all, I want to just support your having done something that feels right in your life, even though it was hard, because that takes courage. And it also takes the willingness to go through exactly what you're going through. The feelings of loss, the feelings of heartache, all the mind stuff that those feelings generate, if only, and why didn't, and all of that. A colleague once wrote in a book about marital separation about this phase that he called the obsessional review, that the mind just obsesses and reviews everything that happened. I think, do you know what the primary emotion that you're feeling? Is it sadness? Is it anger? Can you say?
Well, it's interesting. There is sadness and, but there's also joy, but it's like they're conflicting, and it's like trying to hold them both. And there's energy, but there's also exhaustion.
Right. I don't know if it helps. I think that this is perfectly normal to be feeling exactly what you're feeling. The relief and the energy that comes from the relief of not being burdened by a relationship that wasn't happy or good for you, or maybe probably for both of you. It's rarely bad for one person and great for the other one. You know, it's not usually how it works. The energy that comes and the relief, but also the hollow, the kind of lonesome feeling of sadness and being alone. And you talked about having to hold both. I don't think you have to hold them simultaneously. Like, if you, what are you feeling right now?
You know, there's definitely the sadness, you know, and a bit of like a longing, but then at the same time, there's an acknowledgement that, you know, it needs to happen, and there's an acknowledgement that, you know, there's a good energy to it as well, I guess, but it's, I don't know, it's conflicting. It
Well, I
feels
think it's also that conflict between the head and the heart. The head knows it's the right thing, but the heart
yeah,
is sad, you know? So if you can
yeah,
just tune into your heart for a moment and let yourself feel the emotion that's there. It might be sadness, it might be loneliness, it might be fear, don't know what it is. Just to feel that for a moment and breathe into it. And notice where you feel it in your body. We can all do this with you. I mean, for our own feelings, obviously. Because the more fully you let yourself feel these feelings, the less the head is going to have to come in and give you a headache and, you know, tell you it's really okay and why it's great when you don't feel great. Do you know what I mean? That feeling that is exhausting, actually. And grief is exhausting. And whenever we leave a long relationship, there is grief, even if it's the right thing and you're relieved and full of energy, there's grief. So I think just being really good to yourself, letting yourself feel the feelings one by one and not have to balance, you know, the sadness with the goodness, and just let them come and move through you in waves, and it will really help things heal a lot faster.
the like you're saying, the letting go as they come type of thing, instead of trying to hold them simultaneously.
Yeah. I think it'll be simpler for you and less tiring.
Okay, well,
You can try it.
yeah,
Let us know.
definitely, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
always have, you
Yeah.
know, such good answers.
Thank you. Remember, there's just ideas, sharing my experience, not answers. You find the answer. So, Tyler, do you want to unmute
Tyler?
yourself?
Yeah.
Sorry, Caroline.
No, you're
Yeah,
good.
definitely. I was waiting to get called on. Mitchell, thanks for sharing, man. I think I'm a few months further along down the road, but in a similar position. I think one of the things that Trudy, I think you kind of started to talk about this, or you guys were talking about it, maybe a different wording, but just the idea that this is a journey and it's ups and downs, and accepting it as the journey was really, or has been, something that I've been trying to keep in my mind. Because yeah, you'll have the moments of clarity. I usually have them in meeting, like on Sunday mornings around this time when I'm meeting with everybody here. And then there are downs and there are ups. And during the downtime, it's just looking yourself in the mirror and being kind to yourself and knowing that you're on the right path, that you're doing things spiritually pretty well. So I really, yeah, thank you for sharing that, Mitch. One of the things I was gonna kind of talk about, Trudy, you had talked about what takes away from from joy, what supports, what sets a
Yeah.
foundation for joy, and what takes
Yeah.
away from it. It was in the last like 2 weeks, that's something I've been really thinking through. And I've realized just how fickle it can be, or how fickle our minds can be if something throws us off, either financially or missing a meal, or it's just such a routine. For me, it was a financial thing that popped up, and I realized really quick, oh my gosh, I just lost 2 or 3 days to stress where I could have been finding a little bit of joy. It's just something. I think that was your question, was around some of the things that can knock us off, and I realized just how many things there are out in the world, from the weather to finances, to anything else that can really throw you off. And it's important. It's been important for me, or insightful for me, to kind of write these things down and recognize that they're out there, if nothing else, to when they come, so that I can recognize them. Yeah, that's what I had to say. So thank you for that as a prompt.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important, because what you're talking about are what we would call the hindrances, really, to being clear and feeling reasonably loving and present and good. And naming those hindrances is actually definitely the first step toward not letting them be in charge of you. And just as so many things can throw us off, like you were saying, even missing a meal, or not sleeping well that night, or, just so many things, being tired, or there's so many things that, if we're paying attention, can bring us joy. Just the light on the leaves outside the window, or the blue sky, or there's so many things that we take for granted and don't notice that can bring us joy. So I'm glad you're doing both. Thank you. Yeah. I think, did Rick put a question? Oh, Ava, okay. And then if there's a question in the chat, will you tell me, Caroline? Because I can't really look at the chat while I'm looking.
Yeah, Rick has a question, but we can go ahead and let Eva speak, and then we'll answer Rick's question.
Okay, cool.
Hi.
Hi, nice to see you.
Great to see you too. Well, my question is, like, I find it sometimes difficult to leaning into my own joy, and to acknowledge that, like, as much as sometimes it is difficult to look at really difficult things that happened in life and leaning into the pain. And sometimes I find it that, same difficulty leaning into the joy in the same way. And well, I wonder how many people who struggles with that too. Like, I think it is very sometimes finding it difficult to share something that fortunate thing that happened. It's because I think, I don't know why, but it feels as much as vulnerable as sharing difficult things. I think I worry about the reactions from the other people, so that if I'm not paying attention to it, I don't even recognize my joy, and then just get past, and then just move on to next thing, and then skip through kind of feeling.
Yeah, it's a really great question, because I think you're totally not alone, as you guessed, in being afraid sometimes to acknowledge the things that are good in your life, that make you joyful, or that are fortunate that have happened. And I think some of that probably comes from, at least in me, I know sometimes I feel that way, like I want to kind of gloss over or hide my happiness a little bit, especially if I feel, and that's why I love that quote about the Buddha, go be joyful even among those who are not, and, be healthy even among the sick, and all of those things. I return to that because like I had a mom who, she loved me, but thanks to her, my life was better growing up than her life had been with her mother. And that's common with parents. Sometimes the ability to help a child have a better childhood than the parent had. And at the same time, I know sometimes she was envious of me because I had a better life than she had as a child, even though that's what she wanted from me, of course, as a good parent, right? But she was human and she had those other feelings and they would come out. And I have always had a fear of being attacked or, I don't know, it's irrational, of course, but maybe criticized or something negative happening. So I personally relate to your question very much. And I think, I don't know what you have discovered that helps with that. I just know that to repress our own joy or happiness because we're afraid of being hurt or attacked is not a good way to handle it. That I know isn't a good way to handle it, because repression represses everything. Just like if you won't face your pain, it's harder to have joy because that pain is lurking there, somewhere and affecting you. And yeah, so I think just being aware of that, and it will help you gauge who you're talking to and how much they are able to share in your good fortune or happiness, whatever it might be. That's just sort of how I do it. And again, this is not particularly enlightened strategy. It's just what I came up with in my life. And I think that it's something next week, maybe we can do that practice. That's why I love also the practice of the jelly roll, where you imagine people who care about you surrounding you, and the criteria for having them surround you is people who would be glad when something good happens to you. And also it's an encouragement to surround ourselves as much as possible in our lives with people who will be glad when something good happens to us, just as we, of course, would be glad when something good happens to our friends. But thank you for bringing that up. It's definitely a dimension of joy practice that needs attention in the relational dimension of it. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Eva. I was just going to read Rick's question that
Thank
he
you.
had earlier, and then we'll
Yeah.
go on to Ronick, and I think Juliet also has a question. But Rick's question is, Trudy, one possible downside of glimpsing a brighter brightness is the dark seem to get darker in contrast. Any advice on how to move through this trap?
That's an interesting question, Rick. What I feel about that, or what I've experienced in my life, is that as we practice, we become more sensitive and more open. And therefore, the joy is more joyful, the grief is sadder, the anger can be hotter. Do you know what I'm saying? Like everything can be amplified and become more intense. Love, bringing so much more love into the heart. Does that mean I also experience anger and hate more vividly? Maybe, but at the same time, I'm also being strengthened by the positive qualities, the joy, the love, the compassion, the peace, and equanimity. They are strengthening the heart. And so the dark may appear darker, but you're way more resourced for meeting that darkness. But it is true that one feels things more intensely but it's not a bad thing. It's actually can be a very beautiful thing because of the aliveness and the vividness that comes, the sort of passion that comes with the intensity of full-on aliveness. And yeah, it means feeling things intensely. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just something that I'm offering to you.
Great. Thank you for your question, Rick. And Ronick, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Oh, it's fine. Thank you. I actually just want to start by apologizing. I haven't sent the people who had emailed with the beta testing for the app. I had to move suddenly and just threw me off for 2 weeks, but I'll send it soon. So thank you. And then Trudy, I had a question just about like, you know how sometimes like a new concept is introduced to us and then it doesn't sit with me like right away, but like 2 years later, it like slowly happens. So I'll start noticing joy and then my mind will do everything to like not allow me to feel joy. And then slowly, I like work with it and then I become more and more aware. And I think I've noticed now, like, you know how they say like pleasure and pain comes together, that many times if I'm feeling joy, like I get some good news or anything and I'm feeling really happy, but if I like just like pause and I kind of sit with myself, I always notice there's like the opposite is there. Or I'll like feel pleasure in the morning, I'll be feeling great. And then like come evening, I'm suddenly feeling like pain. And I don't even know, like, and like I've stopped trying to analyze like, oh, where is this coming from? Like, did somebody say that? And I just kind of like, well, it's just like pain, it'll pass. But I kind of noticed like both of them together. So when we're feeling joy, I mean, I don't know if is it okay, but like, is it just, if we feel the pain at the same time, then do we like save ourselves from feeling the pain later is what I'm asking, or I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that strategy, but I do know that, for example, when you have an insight, you'll notice this when you have a big insight, and it might, as you said, it might be years after whatever it is was, you know, that you read it or heard it, or, but suddenly it makes sense. You have an insight, it comes alive in your own experience. Often there's actually, along with the kind of brightness of an insight, there can be grief too. Like, why didn't I know this sooner? My life could have been so different if I'd understood this. Or, do you know what I mean? Feelings like that, they come together, they arrive together, one after the other. Or there can be a lot of joy and then a little backlash to that. Like, wait a minute, am I allowed to feel this happy? I remember one experienced meditator saying to me once, I think I should be arrested for feeling this good on the cushion. You know, this sense that we're doing something wrong. We're just experiencing a lot of pleasure or joy or happiness. And in terms of feeling the pain in order not to feel it later, what I would say about that is the practice of being present with discomfort or pain, whether it's physical or emotional, it's the same pathways in the brain actually. So if you strengthen your ability to sit with some physical discomfort as you meditate, you're actually strengthening also the ability to sit with emotional discomfort as you meditate, and vice versa. If you strengthen the ability to sit quietly with some intense kind of emotional reactivity, it also makes it easier to tolerate and be present with physical pain when it arises. It's not that it doesn't hurt, it's just that you don't shoot that second arrow. You know, the first arrow being whatever hurts, the second arrow being all the thoughts and blame and shame and, you know, everything that follows with that pain. Does that make sense?
I think so.
I don't know if I've answered your question. You can certainly tell me where I've missed.
No, I think it was just, I think I was more referring to not meditating. It's more like the more I'm aware of my inner space, I kind of feel the emotions like not as they're happening, but more quicker than like before, where I would feel it like a day later or like.
Yes. Okay,
Like,
you're talking, yes.
But just like I'll be driving and suddenly it's like, oh, I feel weird or discomfort or pain, but not like physical pain, more like an emotional pain.
Yes, I think what you're talking about, I used to call it like closing the gap. For example, it used to take me days to acknowledge that I was really angry about something. And with the help of psychotherapy and meditation and all the work on myself that I was doing, I would notice that that awareness came closer to the time as I increased my capacity for awareness. And so it became possible to actually then know in the moment, oh, this is anger, I'm mad, instead of it going into cold storage for a day or two before I could safely allow myself to feel that emotion. So I think maybe that's what you're referring to. The more the mindfulness gets strong in you, the less of that gap there is between something happening and the recognition of the feeling you have about it. Is it more like that, what you're talking about?
Yes. No, I don't know. Can I think about it and get back to you? I think
Yes.
it's one of those things where I'll take like another year and then be like, oh, that's what she was talking about. But, okay.
Thank you. And you like to be called, the way that you like your name pronounced is Ronak, right? Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you,
I'll
Ronak.
remember that for next time. Juliet, if you want to go ahead and share, I know your raise hand function wasn't working, but thanks for messaging me.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
just,
you, Caroline. Hi,
hi,
Trudy.
Juliet.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, I love this subject so much. Mudita has been, and I love that video with the little bubbles. Oh my God, with that dog and that little child. It really pierced my heart, actually. And I was having some contraction around my heart. So when it pierced my heart, a few tears came out and then I softened. I was able to soften. And so,
beautiful.
Yeah, but Mudita has been a guiding force in my spiritual practices for like 25 years when I first understood what the word meant, which was that ease of being able to be happy for other people. And it comes fairly naturally to me, besides, like you said, all the psychotherapy and all the practices. And I set myself up for it because I've also naturally, I've had very good health. I've had generally a pretty good attitude, disposition. But I also set myself up for it by, the meditation every day and then doing walks and swimming. And I do things to perpetuate that. And whenever I am challenged to feel happy for other people, to me, it's a red flag for me to check in with myself and to say, what
yes.
that is, because it's almost like, I feel like the negative things are suspect almost at this point. It's like, oh, you're not happy for your neighbor that went to Sedona and you didn't get to go to Sedona. There's so many things. If I hadn't heard about it, would I have been unhappy? Probably, that wouldn't have affected me. It didn't bother me that much, but anything that brings me out of mudita, I consider that something to be looked at like, that's a little bit of an imbalance, and how can I bring myself back into that state of balance? And it's one of my.
That's.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's just one of my favorite words and a strong guiding light. So whenever my mudita is waning, I just need to check in.
That's beautiful, Juliet. And yeah, it's very wise. Thank you. I also feel like, it's a clue. For example, let's just use the example of your neighbor going to Sedona and you having a twinge, about that. Well, maybe it means you need to go to Sedona. You see what I'm saying? There's things that's also a signal. Maybe there's something that needs to happen in your life. It may not be Sedona, but maybe, taking a day and just having an outing, or do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Absolutely. I know for myself, I have to check in and say, wait a minute, if there's what you called, I liked it, a waning of mudita, then maybe it's something I'm missing in my own life and need to pay attention to. So thank you. Yeah. And thank you, everybody. We've come to the end of our time together. And I would just like to take a moment to sit together for a minute and also to acknowledge, which I forgot to do at the beginning, our ancestors. I really wanted to do that today, and I'll do it more next week, to acknowledge our ancestors who have been on the land wherever we are before us. Here in where I am in San Rafael, it's the Coast Miwok tribes who inhabited this land and took care of it for thousands of years. And it's just good to know wherever you are, who was there before, who took care of that place, this place before you. So just to sit for a moment. At the end of a period of study and practice together, we offer the goodness of our practice to all beings everywhere, without exception. Whatever has been useful, beneficial, whatever we've enjoyed together this morning, to freely offer to all beings. This is how we share the blessings, the gratitude, the appreciation for this practice. May we and all beings grow in our capacity to cultivate and experience and share mudita, empathic, sympathetic joy in this life. So thank you, everybody. You can unmute yourselves and say hi and goodbye. And if you want to, I encourage you to join a breakout group. You can get to know each other a little better. And I will see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Trudy.
Thank you.
So happy to see you. Bye.
So glad we did this.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, for those who are going to come back for breakout rooms,
Bye.
come back around 2:40 and we'll get those going.
Okay, very good. Thank you.